I'm Captain Hoff, CEO of Founderspace, the leading global startup accelerator. I'm also author of the award-winning books, Make Elephants Fly, Surviving a Startup, and The 5 Forces. Innovation Explosion. I'm going to share with you some of what I have learned here in Silicon Valley and working around the world with hundreds of startups, many of which have innovated, created new breakthrough products and services, and transformed their industries. I have also collaborated and consulted with some of the largest corporations in the world and helped them transform their teams into innovation teams, teams that actually came up with new products and new services they would never have come up with if they hadn't radically transformed their internal processes. In this talk, I'm going to share with you some of the ideas and methodologies that you can use in your business to innovate. Innovate or die. If you aren't innovating, eventually you will die. Your business will go away. It will not continue to lead the market. You cannot be a market leader. You cannot even remain competitive unless you are constantly innovating. Innovation is no longer an option. It's the rule. New technologies are emerging every day. They are transforming industries. And if you're not using them, one of your competitors will be. And they will gain the competitive edge on you. They will undercut your business. They will steal your customers. You will no longer be able to compete with them in the marketplace. Innovation has a life cycle. Every product goes through this life cycle. You innovate, you come up with a new product, you experience rapid growth, and then eventually the growth tapers off. This happens because new products, improved products, are coming into the marketplace, and they are taking away those customers. If you aren't the one to cannibalize your own customers with your new products, with better features and services, take them away from your old products and transfer them to your new products, someone else will. I can guarantee you there's someone out there, some nimble startup or even a big company that is trying to figure it out. And they will figure it out given enough time and given the new technologies at their disposal. They will figure out how to build superior products, superior services that attract your customers in ways that your old products don't. So you must innovate before that life cycle is out. If you wait till the end, till the product is already plateauing or even going down, it's too late. You don't have time. Innovation is hard. It takes time. It takes work. People think it's magic, but it's not. It is a process, and I am going to show you that process. Challenge your beliefs. One of the first things you need to do just to begin the innovation process is to look at everything you believe, everything you think is true, because I can almost guarantee you that some of the things you think are absolutely true are no longer true. Why is this? Well, because the world is changing. Markets change all the time. They make things that were true in the past no longer true in the future. Technology is always changing, always evolving. New technologies will change the rules of business, how things are done, how they can be done. You need to be aware of this. So one exercise I would like you to do is write down a list of every single thing you believe to be true about your business, about distribution, about your company, about the way things are done, everything you think is absolutely true. And then I want you to challenge them. I want you and your team, get your entire team together to question these. Is it really true? Is it still true? With these new technologies in the pipeline coming, will it be true a year from now? Because if it won't, you better start to address this. If you aren't exploring how these fundamental things that you believe to be true aren't true, then somebody else will, and they will figure it out. Because just one of these things, one of these key things, one of these assumptions you made about your business, if it's not true, it could completely tilt the playing field in the favor of somebody else who figures it out first. For your business to actually move forward, you can't do this challenge your beliefs once. Really innovative businesses are always challenging their beliefs. They're always saying, we thought this was true. We thought our customers thought this. Do they still think this? We thought this product is really competitive. Is it still competitive? We thought this technology was all that's out there. Is it all that's out there, or is there something better? This is what you need to go through for every process in your business, for all the products that you make and how you make them, how you distribute them, how you manufacture them, everything. You need to challenge your beliefs and then find out which elements you can poke holes through and start to explore those, start to figure out, assign teams to figure that out. Okay, this might no longer be true. This group of people, go figure that out. Figure that out. What are the latest technologies? Why wouldn't this be true? What are our competitors doing? What could we be doing differently than we're doing now? It just takes one of those things to spark a whole new wave of innovation and maybe launch an entirely new business unit. Challenge your beliefs. Think big. A lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of CEOs of big corporations believe that they have to have a big idea. They have to think big. They have to transform their entire company in order to innovate. This isn't true. You don't need to transform your entire organization. First of all, if you're in a larger company, not everybody in your company is going to be capable of innovating or even want to innovate. In fact, the majority of people will not care about innovating. Even if you tell them to innovate, they won't know what to do. It's not in their DNA. In fact, a small minority of people are the ones who are going to totally transform your business. So I hear CEOs all the time tell me, we're going to put in place an innovation program. Everybody in our company is going to innovate across the board, top to bottom. It never works that way. That sounds good. It sounds attractive. It's great on paper. It's good marketing, but it's not reality. In reality, it's usually a subset of the people in your company who are really geared towards innovation who will drive that process. And often they won't drive it with big ideas. So another mistake of thinking big is that the CEOs, whether you're in a big corporation or a tiny startup, they'll think they need a big idea to begin with, but you don't. You don't need a big idea to begin with. In fact, many big ideas, they are just kind of hyped up things that when you say them, they sound very attractive. They get a lot of attention. But in reality, they mean nothing. They're impossible to implement. You could say this thing that sounds good, but it's not rooted in the real world. And therefore, you don't even know where to start. Your team doesn't know where to start. How can you actually make this real? You need some real technology. You need some real insights. You need real customers who really need this. Big ideas don't always map to what we're actually doing. So I am going to show you how not just to think big, and trust me, thinking big is fine. You can think big, but sometimes you have to act small. Start small. Most people don't realize it, but many of the world's biggest, most impactful innovations that transformed entire industries came from very small ideas. The people working on these ideas often didn't even know what would happen or where they would lead. It was a project, an experiment that they were doing that led to something else, that unlocked something, that then opened the door to the huge innovation. So when you're innovating, I like to say it's a process. Innovation isn't just an idea. It's not like the light bulb going off in Thomas Edison's head. It is an entire process you go through. And during that process, you discover things. Now, the process can begin, and often does, with little things that you're working on to improve a product, a service, customer relations, something. You are working on these, and then they start to transform how you think and open up possibilities. Let me give you a few examples of startups that started with very small ideas that led to enormous changes. So I know the founders of YouTube, but most people don't realize that when they began the company, they didn't have a big idea. They didn't think they were going to change the entire media landscape. They were going to reinvent broadcast television. They were going to become the largest destinations for videos in the world. Nobody thought it at the time. What they were doing actually was working on a video dating site, something entirely different. They wanted people to date by video, but users didn't like the experience. They felt video dating was awkward, so uncomfortable, that their startup was actually failing. Around the same time, they had thrown a party with their friends, and they had this video that they wanted to share, the founders of YouTube. They wanted to share it with all their friends. Well, there was no easy way to do it at the time. So what they did was they thought, well, what if we uploaded this video to our website, which we've already built? We've built the site, we just upload it there, and then instead of sharing the video, we share the link and they can watch it on our website. Now that little idea that was really only invented to help them share a video of their party was the kernel that led to what YouTube is today. Because as soon as they realized how easy it was, they thought, well, other people probably want to do this. And they started to enable people to share a link to a video on their website. This simple link sharing innovation then led to YouTube because all these people started uploading their videos to YouTube. YouTube became a destination for content. Hence, it became the broadcast network. It started, though, with something entirely different. There are so many other startups out there that began in similar ways. The site Flickr, it became the #1, and it was definitely the first social sharing site for photos. Now, it didn't begin with that idea. It actually began as a game, an online game. So the founders of this game, they were making the game, and the game wasn't doing well. The game was failing. So they started to add feature after feature after feature. None of these features helped really improve the game. People still didn't like the game, even with all these features. But one of those features happened to be sharing photos with members of the game. And they found that people actually liked that more than the game. So they recognized that, and they pulled this feature out, and they made it its own site. And boom, Flickr was born. It grew very, very fast. And then Yahoo acquired it. Now that is another example of small idea inside a larger project that they actually just stumbled upon. This happens over and over again with so many startups. Twitter, look at Twitter. Same thing with Twitter. They were actually a podcasting site, and then they started to experiment with microblogging, and choom, another one. Groupon was a site for doing social good, but then people on the site started to organize themselves to get discounts. Boom, another idea. Idea after idea after idea. Even on Yelp, the rating system was something they didn't expect. It wasn't the main feature of Yelp. It was a side feature, but it became the main draw. These things happen over and over again. Companies start with something and they're experimenting and playing, and then that magic happens. So when you're innovating, don't kill the small ideas. In fact, you want your team to start small. You want them to start a lot of little things and start to see where they lead and what they unlock. That is the key to innovating, starting small. Small teams. When innovating, the size of the team is really important. The larger a team gets, the harder it is to innovate. The reason for this is that large teams often move more slowly. It's hard to get a lot of people moving in any direction, and really keeping them moving in that direction is okay. But as soon as you have to switch directions, it becomes even harder because then you have to get everybody's buy-in to make a change. Whereas small teams move fast and are also more agile. They can change directions really quickly. It's only a few people. You only need a few people to buy in. Okay, let's change this way. No, let's change that way. Let's start over. It's not working. Let's try this. Innovation is all about change, and it's all about the speed of change. It's the speed of change. You're iterating on an idea over and over and over, running all these little experiments, and each time you have to adjust your direction. Big teams, very hard to do this. Somebody's going to always be resisting that change. The other thing about larger teams is they become more hierarchical. You have to have managers, you have people. The managers spend most of their time managing. They are kind of more hands-off on the innovation process. A small team Even the CEO is right in there with everybody else. It's the CEO and the founders are all innovating together. So they all understand the problems at the same level. They can talk more openly about it. It's really a totally different group dynamic. This is why even big companies that are innovative, like Amazon or Google, which are incredibly innovative for big companies, they do it by breaking it up into small teams. Their innovation teams are small. They have to be small. In fact, Jeff Bezos has a rule. He calls it the 2 pizza rule. He says if your innovation team can't be fed off just 2 pizzas, it's too large. That's the rule. So remember this. Somewhere between 2 and 10 people is ideal on an innovation team. You get more than 10 people, it starts to calcify, slow down. The communication breaks down. It's not the ideal for innovation. Can larger teams innovate? Absolutely. But usually it's because they break off a piece of the team, they give it autonomy over a project, and they allow that piece of the team to move forward and make a lot of changes on their own without reporting back to the main body. That is how you innovate in larger organizations. When starting any project, I always prefer getting a small group of people who know each other very well, who feel comfortable talking to one another, and then just setting them loose on the task and giving them complete freedom. Remember that small teams produce much more than large teams when innovating. Small scope. In addition to keeping the team small, keeping the idea small, it's also important to keep the scope small. The scope of a project really affects where that project will go. If you have this big scope and you're trying to do all these things at once, it becomes incredibly hard to innovate because you have to build so much before you can even test anything. And innovation is about the process of discovery. And discovery happens through testing, building something, putting it out there, seeing how people use it, getting feedback, analyzing that feedback, and then moving forward. The larger the scope gets, you have all these moving pieces that either need to be tested separately or together. It becomes very cumbersome. And honestly, most products, almost every great product that begins with a single idea. Think about the App Store. When you download an app on the App Store, you usually download it for one reason, because it's exceptionally good at one thing. And that's what it started out as. That's the core. So getting down to this core, keeping the scope small and just focusing on what are the essential elements of this product or service that we are offering that are going to be so much better than everybody else. That's what you need to focus on. If you could do this, then you could try one thing with it. If it doesn't work, if the core doesn't work, nothing else works. So keeping the scope small forces you just to do that. Don't get sidetracked with all these extra features and all this integration and all this other stuff. No, we're just going to focus on that one thing we do exceptionally well. And then once we get that working, once that really works, we can start adding on to it. That is the best way to approach innovation. That is why I always say, keep the scope small. Small budgets, the amount of money an innovation team has, actually has an impact on the innovation process. Teams that get too much money too soon, they actually don't innovate as well as teams that are under budgetary constraints. This is why I always say, when advising innovators, keep the budgets to a bare minimum. Just give them enough to get to the next milestone. And honestly, when you're a startup on your own, you usually don't have any money. And you have to be scrappy. You have to do things the hard way. You have to figure things out. It makes you more creative. The constraint of not too much money actually forces you to think, is there another way to do this? Is there a better way to do this with what we have, with our brain power, not just buying it, not buying consulting services, not getting help from the outside? We have to do it ourselves because we don't have a lot of money. I have seen innovation teams, especially those I have advised in large corporations, where they're given too much money. And then instead of doing stuff like basic market research themselves, where a startup would just go talk directly to the customer, get feedback and start that relationship, the team in these corporations, they go to a market research consulting firm and pay them, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars to start doing various research projects for them. That is a waste of money. It's also a waste of time because these market research firms are moving slowly. So it slows the whole process down. It really hurts innovation. The other problem with having a lot of money is that, the team lead feels like they have to spend it. So instead of just sitting on the money, often they start hiring people they don't need, because they feel like they have all this money, they should have a bigger team. And again, the size of the team, the bigger it gets, especially with people who aren't really necessary, just slows things down. When innovating, put small amounts of money to work. As a startup, you often don't have a choice. This is the way it is. But even in large companies that have seemingly unlimited resources like Apple, Amazon, Google, they have so much money, but they need to, if they really want their teams to be scrappy and innovate like startups, think like a startup, they should give them just enough money so that they can make it to the next level, test something out, hit that milestone, analyze it, show the proof that they're on the right path and where they're going to go next. And then they get a little more money and a little more money. Small budgets make a big difference when innovating. Small time. When innovating, compressing the time you innovate in is really important. Really good startups innovate very fast. But what I'm talking about is not the total time of innovation. The total time of innovation you can't predict. Sometimes you get that breakthrough on day 2. Other times it's day 200. You can't know ahead of time how long it's going to take to come up with the innovation that will change your industry. So what you can do, the thing you can control, is the speed at which you innovate. And that is the speed at which you go through the innovation loop, the speed at which you iterate. From the time you come up with the idea, till you figure out how to test that idea, till you gather data from your customers, you analyze that data, and you iterate, you make changes and move forward. That thing you want to get, that loop you want to get as fast as possible. So literally you're trying new ideas, testing new hypotheses every single week, sometimes multiple times a week. If you can do this, you start to become really innovative, because innovation is about gathering knowledge, the speed at which you're learning. It's really about the speed at which you're learning, not the total time it takes to innovate. So because in the real world, different problems require different amounts of time. You just don't know. And making a breakthrough isn't something you can put on a schedule. Okay, 3 months from now, we're going to make that breakthrough that will change the world. You don't know that. You just know you're going down this path, you're discovering all these things, you're changing your mind, you're changing directions, and along the way, you will learn something that will really help you in producing new products and services for your customers. That is the key. And the key is to keep the time, the speed at which you iterate in going down this innovation process as short as possible. Innovation loop. What is an innovation loop? Well, I want to explain in detail how this functions, because the innovation loop lies at the heart of the innovation process. It is what it's all about. Innovation loops typically are very simple. They start with a hypothesis. What do you assume to be true? You don't know it's true, but you think this is true, and this directly impacts where we are headed with our project. So in a project, you usually have a lot of hypotheses, a number of them. Some are very important to the future of the project. Others are interesting. You want to know if they're true or not, but they're not nearly as important. The thing you need to do is take your most important hypotheses, put them at the top, and start testing those first. Put them into the innovation loop first. Now, hopefully, you can design experiments around these that test these that don't take too long, because you don't want to slow down the innovation process. So really, the quality of the experiment is absolutely important, but also the duration and resources required. A lot of times you're resource constrained, you're time constrained. You need to move through this loop quickly and gather data in order to come up with an answer. So sometimes you won't test some hypotheses, even though they're really important. They have to be tested later First, you might test other ones that are easier to design experiments for and faster in going through the loop. So you put out your hypothesis, you design an experiment, that experiment extracts data, you get that data usually from your customers or partners somewhere in the real world, you get this data, you analyze that data, and then you determine if those assumptions you made, the hypotheses, were true or not. Now, if they're not true, it means you need to change your direction. If they are true, it means you can proceed to the next one, testing the next thing in line. If it's hazy, if you didn't get good quality data or something is messed up and you don't really get a clear answer, maybe you have to redesign the experiment and go through the loop again. Really, what's important in innovating is the speed at which you go through this loop, the quality of the data, and then the insights you gain from analyzing that data. Those are the criteria that you really know if you're making progress. If you're going very fast, you're gathering high quality data, and you're gaining insights, then you are innovating. You don't know how long it's going to take to get to the end of the innovation process. Could be years, could be days away. You don't know, but you can measure and gauge your progress simply by what you're learning. And I always like to say, innovation is about learning. It's all about learning, the speed at which you learn. And the innovation loop is the primary mechanism by which your company or your team learns through the innovation process. Pick the right people. I can tell you from my personal experience, nothing matters more when innovating than the people you're innovating with, those people you're collaborating with. If you don't bring the right people on your team from the beginning, it's really, really hard to innovate. And I've seen this in my own companies, my own startups. I've consulted for hundreds of startups, helping them, mentoring them through this process of innovation. And I've worked with some of the largest companies, global companies in the world, helping them structure innovation teams. Time and time again, it comes down to the people. The people with similar amounts of money, in a similar environment, with similar ideas. You get the right people in the room, boom, magic happens. You get the wrong people in the room, nothing happens. Honestly, when picking people for an innovation team, a lot of stuff you would normally consider doesn't matter. You can often bring in like the star people, like the top scientist or the top engineer or the top designer. But if they're not the type of person who is naturally group-oriented, who's willing to share and cooperate in the group, the innovation team is dysfunctional. It doesn't work. Or you can say, like a lot of companies do, anybody will do. Everybody should innovate. We'll just bring in these people because they were an important person in the company. But honestly, you don't need somebody who is very high paid or has all these PhDs. It doesn't make a difference. What matters is actually who the person is. When picking people, what matters are a couple things. Number one, they're curious. They're always asking questions. People who innovate are questioning everything around them. Number two, you need at least one person on that team who is super driven. I call that person the driver. They're going to push and push and push everybody forward. They're goal-oriented. You need other people on the team who really have expertise in certain areas that are critical. So if it's a certain area of science that is critical to what you're innovating on, you need those people in there. And then you need sort of the people, the free thinkers, the ones who are more creative, who are thinking outside the box. They might not be a driver, they might not have deep scientific knowledge, but they are looking at the world from a different perspective. You start to put these people together in different combinations and you get different types of magic happening, like chemical reactions, people interacting with each other. I often say, if you start with an innovation team and it just isn't working, you guys aren't like gelling, coming up with stuff, kill the team, move on, start something else, throw everything else, get new people, start over. In a big company, you should start a lot of innovation teams and start seeing who's really producing and who isn't. And the ones who aren't, kill those teams and rematch people in different ways. It doesn't mean everybody on the team that failed was bad. In fact, there can be good people on a team that doesn't work. It might just be how those people are interacting with each other. And if you pair them in a different way, the sparks start flying. It's all about the people. Spend more time on choosing the people you want for your innovation teams than on what they innovate on. Trust me, if you have good people, they understand your business, and they're interested and curious and exploring, they will come up with stuff. You don't need to tell them what to innovate on. You don't even need to judge the ideas, because what ideas they begin with, usually those are just the starting point in a long journey, and the ideas will change and change and change, but the people will remain the same. Those people will either carry it all the way through or they won't. So pick the right people. Establish dedicated teams. I have seen time and time again, especially in larger companies, where you make an innovation team, but none of the people are fully committed. They still have their main job that they're supposed to take care of. And innovation is sort of a side project that they volunteered to do because they had this great idea or they thought it would be interesting or challenging. But honestly, if somebody has a split focus, they're bifurcated. On one hand, they have their boss who's demanding all these things. On the other hand, they have this innovation project on the side. It almost never works. Like Google, they had this rule, which they no longer have, by the way. It was called the 20% rule, which meant you had 20% of your time to work on any project you wanted, to innovate. And everybody in the company was supposed to innovate with this 20% rule. Well, what happened? Nobody. It never really worked. It worked in theory, but when it was put in place in practice, what happened was people would start innovating on something, and then their boss would say, "What are you doing? Why are you wasting time on that? I need you to do this. This needs to get done." And that person would have a choice then. Either they would have to totally abandon innovation and just focus on what their boss wants, or they'd have to innovate on nights and weekends. On their free time, when they were supposed to be home with their family or meeting their friends or doing things like that. It became really hard, and that's why most people ended up at a certain point just stopping. I have consulted for many large companies that have run programs similar to this, where we brought together these innovation teams, and maybe one or two people on the team was full-time and the rest weren't, or maybe none of them were. It made it so difficult because every week we would meet with them and we'd say, "What progress have you made?" "Well, I got busy with my main job," and people would always be having excuses, excuse after excuse after excuse. So what I say is when you're choosing people, first of all, you got to get people who are really motivated, people who really want to innovate. And if you find them, then just let them do it full time. Give them a break from their job and say, "This is your job." Because really, people only do one thing really well at a time. They need one responsibility. Let them do it. Let them focus. They'll make far more progress than if you do it the other way. In fact, if you do it the other way, you're just wasting their time. You're wasting your money. You're stressing everybody out, everybody around them out. Their boss will be stressed out because they're not focused on their work. They'll be stressed out because they kind of have two things going at once that are competing with each other. So don't do that. Have dedicated teams. Encourage them to explore. When you have an innovation team, you don't want to keep them constrained. You don't want to keep them under your thumb and control what they're doing. If you try to do that, you will squash innovation. You will kill it before it even blossoms. No, innovators, what they are is they are explorers, and they need the freedom to go out there, to discover new things, to go on a journey into uncharted territory. If you knew where they were supposed to go, you would just go there. The point of innovation is you don't know. You need them to go where you haven't gone. You need them to discover things you didn't even know existed. This is why trying to keep innovators on a short leash and control them is wrong. You need to cut that leash so they are free to wander wherever their interests take them. Now, let me give you an example of this, of encouraging people to explore. At Sony, there was this guy, and he was fascinated by Nintendo, like the game machine. And he thought, wow, this is amazing. This is an amazing market. And he started to play around with in his little lab, making his own game machine. Like, how could I do this better? What does this mean? And Sony, at the time, it was a long time ago, they didn't have a games unit. They weren't in games. They were in movies and electronics and all these other things. And when the higher up managers saw this person doing this stuff, they tried to kill it. They're like, what is this person doing? They're wasting their time. We're not a game company. We're not even in that business. We don't make toys. This isn't what we do. We make real electronics. We make movies and content and all this other stuff. But this game business, what is this? They tried to kill it. Luckily, the boss right above him protected him and allowed him to keep exploring, trying this crazy stuff that the upper management didn't get at all. Then he made a breakthrough, and he started to show people that he had actually built a better system. This system became the first Sony PlayStation. And Sony PlayStation, since that day, has made up a growing portion of Sony's revenue. It became their future. The upper management almost killed that. They almost killed that by not allowing this person to explore what was interesting to him. If you have an innovation team, if you have people on your team that are really interested in things, don't say, no, that's not the focus of our company. No, you can't do that. In fact, if they're the type of people who are natural innovators, put them on a team, give them some support, let them go out there, see what they find, let them explore. Failure is fine. Most of us hate to fail. Nobody wants to start a project, let alone an innovation project, and have it wind up a failure. But let me tell you, you cannot innovate without failing. Innovation is intrinsic to the process of innovation. It's like the yin and the yang. You can't have light without dark. It is like risk and reward. You cannot get the big rewards if you don't take the big risks. In innovation, you're trying to discover something nobody else has discovered. If they already knew it, they would be doing it. But you are innovating. You don't know. So in that process of discovering, you are going to fail and fail and fail again. And perhaps the entire project is a failure because your original assumptions were simply wrong. But you wouldn't know that if you didn't go there and test it out. That is why if you try to remove failure from innovation, you kill innovation. If you can only greenlight projects that you know will succeed, well, then you're not innovating. By definition, you're not innovating. You're just doing what you know how to do. You are implementing. So keep this in mind. If your innovation teams are failing, it doesn't mean they're on the wrong track. It means that they are going through innovation. And really, it's what they learn out of those failures. That's what you're gaining. You're gaining knowledge. Now, the projects themselves, they may turn out to be huge multi-billion-dollar businesses at the end of the day, or they may turn out to be nothing. And in most cases, in 9 out of 10 cases, they will be nothing. In fact, it will be more than 9 out of 10 that will ultimately not become these huge moneymakers. But remember, it only takes one of these giant successes, these multi-billion-dollar businesses, to totally transform your company. So if you want to benefit from innovation, you have to not only put up with failure, you have to embrace it. Get others on board. When innovating, you don't want to isolate the innovation teams. I work as a consultant for big corporations, and when they're innovating, often I see the innovation teams are put off in some incubator away from everybody else. So there's really no interaction, or they're buried like in this corner office and they really don't go out. They don't share what they're doing with anybody else in the company. This is a mistake. Fundamentally, you want your innovation teams to sit within the organization as a whole, and actually whatever they're doing, anybody from any of the other departments should be able to see. It should all be open. It should all be transparent. Everything the innovation team is learning should be shared openly with the company. This way, other people in the organization can start to benefit. And as they benefit, they will become more open to helping the innovation team. If this small innovation team with a few people, they don't have a lot of resources, they may need to go to the sales department and say, could you help introduce us to customers? Or they may need to go to R&D and say, we need some of your learning from R&D, some of the technology that we could experiment with. Or they may want to go to marketing and say, can we look at the data that you guys have been gathering? And these other departments likewise should be able to come to the innovation team and say, what are you working on? We want to see, what have you learned? All this, all the knowledge they're gaining is so valuable. And if you keep it siloed just within a small innovation group, then when that project fails, all of it goes away. None of it was shared, so nobody knows what they learned. But if this innovation team is constantly pushing this knowledge out there, getting other people on board, getting them involved, then the knowledge that they're gaining will have a lasting impact on your company long after the project, whether it becomes the next billion-dollar business or it simply goes away. The company as a whole will grow through innovation by getting others on board. Feed the brain. It's not enough just to have innovation teams, but really what you want is to give them access to knowledge. There's so much information out there in the world, and much of it your employees just don't know about. They're busy, they're focused on their jobs, they don't normally encounter it. People tend to do what the people around them do. So if you have a culture where everybody is just focused on the bottom line, then that's what they're doing. They're just focusing on the bottom line. But if you start to transform your culture by bringing in new ideas from the outside, exposing your team to them, bringing in lectures, bringing in videos, making it free to access all this material, books, whatever they need, as long as it's educating themselves, that is a good thing. The other thing you can do to feed the brain is actually get your employees, the ones who have unique talents, who have unique capabilities, who really know stuff, have pools of knowledge and passion around it, have them come in and give them a forum where they can present to the rest of the company. They can actually become teachers to your other employees. And they can share, like in our department, we're working on this technology, and this is what it does, and this is why it's so fascinating. And then groups from other departments can come in and share what they're doing. This type of information exchange, this type of brain feeding is really important. And it can happen, especially if the upper management, the CEO and the upper management make it happen. They create an environment for that type of sharing, for that type of knowledge exchange. So again, let me emphasize, if you want an innovative organization as a whole, not everybody has to be an innovator, but the more you feed them, the more new information and ideas, the more and more people will start to naturally become more innovative on their jobs. Keep pushing the limits. Great organizations that truly innovate are always pushing their limits. They're always saying, what could we do more? What can we do differently? Can we go beyond what our original mission was? Can we expand our universe and encompass that? Look at these companies like Google. Google is trying everything under the sun. You name it, Google is thinking of it. Google X, their experimental group, is launching space balloons. They're experimenting with extending life. They're doing things with quantum computing, on and on and on. Google is pushing the limits of what's possible. They have even experimented with teleportation and space elevators, crazy ideas. They didn't work out, but Google isn't afraid to push the limits. They are kind of the masters of the moonshot. Jeff Bezos at Amazon, always pushing the limits. How much can we sell? Where can we sell? Can we sell every product in the world? Can we dominate every category? He is just always looking for that next opportunity. This is what great companies do. Startups do it. They begin with one idea, they begin really focused, really small, they nail it, and then they just keep growing and growing and growing, doing everything under the sun. So if your organization is really going to amp up the growth, if that's what you want, if you want to be a growing, dynamic organization, look at where your limits are and push them out. Really, you should have no limits. The rule is you shouldn't have limits. You should go where the opportunities are, where it takes you. Of course, you want to start from your core expertise, from your competence. But if your competence and the money you have enable you to do it, then do it. Take that next step. Don't be afraid to push the limits. I hope you enjoyed the talk. If you liked it, you can come to founderspace.com. You can check out our latest events, contact us, and see my latest books, Make Elephants Fly, Surviving a Startup, and The 5 Forces. You can also find me on all the major social networks. Just search for Founderspace.